is a revolution. Thanks for joining us once again in the conservative underground on WHIG Radio, fighting the socialist slide to the left with autonomy, accountability, and true altruism. Happy Patriots Day today for 2009. Today, of course, we commemorate the shot heard round the world, the battles of Lexington and Concord, the battles that began the American Revolution against the tyrannical government bent on exercising an overbearing control over its subjects, over its citizens. Perhaps it's allergy season and I'm therefore a bit moody, overtired, and sensitive, but reading the account of what happened in Lexington today brought a lump to my throat. It's like the lump I got while watching The Passion of the Christ. Someone once felt so strongly that we in America should be free of government intervention, free to exercise our own autonomy, that they were willing to fight and die for it. I'd like to read for you now an account of the battle at Lexington as recorded by Michael Brendan Doherty of the Putnam County News and Recorder. A shot rang out. Most likely it came from the colonial onlooker apart from the two groups of men. The regulars, under poor command, wildly assaulted Parker's men anyway, killing 8 of them before advancing towards Concord. A force 10 times the size of Parker's would meet them there. The rebels at Concord, under the command of Colonel James Barrett, wisely moved their forces to Northbridge outside of town, and allowed the regulars to take Concord. On the bridge, other Minutemen companies from western towns joined Barrett's force. As they saw smoke rising from the town, they advanced back to Concord, causing the regulars under Captain Walter Laurie to retreat before them. Then, after what was likely a panicked warning shot from an exhausted regular soldier, the two groups fired on one another. The regulars were trapped and outnumbered, and several of their officers were killed instantly. They retreated to the protection of the companies in the town center. The rebels were stunned by their success. Soon they were joined by more militia forces gathered from over New England. They pursued the regulars back to Boston, engaging in skirmishes along the way. By the next morning, militia forces had grown up to 15,000 and surrounded Boston. They were later adopted by the Second Continental Congress into the Continental Army. The first shots of the American Revolution, uncertain, panicked, fearful, signaled by the beginning of the end of the British rule in the 13 colonies. Revere may never have shouted, "The British are coming," during his famous ride, but it turns out there would have been a far more important arrival to announce, before it received its birth certificate, in the form of the Declaration of Independence. The American nation was born in the battlefields of Lexington and Concord. Folks, these brave men enabled us to have the country we live in today. And it bothers me to think that the freedoms they fought for are being eroded. And yes, as a liberal friend of mine who works in the employ of the Census Bureau likes to point out, this has been going on for a while. It's not like America just went socialist overnight. But now, with this selling of our children into indentured servitude of Red China, the feds have gone too far. I like to paraphrase English parliamentician Edmund Burke. An American is the unfittest person on earth to argue another American into slavery. Now, Burke was talking about the Englishmen working for England, forcing oppressive English rule on the English colonists, who were not yet American. America hadn't been born yet. But this concept holds just as true for an American today who is willing to chain our future to such a debt to Red China. How many times does the Obama plan to multiply our already massive debt? And the left still summons up all of its maturity to call us teabaggers. This not only from the media at large, but from my friends and colleagues. As you may or may not know, I work in a fairly left-leaning industry in left-leaning New York City. So frequently, people sound off around me about how stupid the right is, and before they know where I stand on the matter. This week, the chorus was that I'm a teabagger. This from the same mature crowd that rides with Critical Mass. Now, for those of you who are unfamiliar with Critical Mass, it's a monthly protest ride held in many cities in the U.S. Hundreds of cyclists gather together and shut down the city once a month, just as the UN does when it's in session. The only difference here is that this fun ride also has a sub-protest message. The overlying message is, of course, bicycle advocacy, which is great. But sub-protests can be as lovely as Save the Bronx Gardens, or as nasty as the anti-GOP rally got in New York during the GOP convention back in '06. It was just before the convention that I stopped going, as the sub-protests were getting more and more leftist, and the rioters getting uglier and uglier. And I don't mean unattractive. I mean polarizing and angry. A parade like this will always shut down traffic. Traffic will get angry at this. One way of dealing with this is to smile and apologize and promise that the parade will be over soon. Just wait a second and enjoy the show. Another way, way more popular with those who attend the mass, is to curse traffic, further broadening the gap in the us and them mentality of all motorists against cyclists and all cyclists against motorists. These rides were rife with angry cyclists just looking to incite drivers, acting like it was their God-given right, the few of them that believe in God, to stop city traffic. I saw more baiting on these rides. I obviously had to stop going. Now, compare these rides and this ugly, rude, crass conduct to the tea parties of the 15th. The New York City Tea Party was a fairly peaceful event. I mean, there were a couple guys who got ticked off when they were told by the police to stay in one place instead of the other. But it seemed like most of us out there were trying to play ball with the police. I think Tea Partiers rather like the police. I'm not sure you would find the same pro-law enforcement sentiment on the protests on the other side of the aisle.